Welcome to Fantasy Focus. Today's podcast is presented by Geico. You can watch us every weekday at 11 a.m. on ESPN's Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube feeds, as well as the ESPN app. And you can download Fantasy Focus wherever you get your podcast. Happy Thursday. It's the start of Week 5. Field and Mike Clay and Stephania and Daniel are here. We are excited for the action. Stephania, what's happening in the other corner of the studio?
It's chilly over here.
Oh.
What's the temperature like where you are?
Well, I have partial sleeves on.
Yeah,
so,
I made
a
mistake.
Yeah. Well, let's be honest, Stephania. It's Arms Day, so it's a great way to show off.
What day isn't Arms Day?
I don't know. Matthew is not here, so he would be the person that could answer questions that involve a lack of physical fitness. But instead, we have Mike Clay. Mike, what's going on, my friend?
Not too much. It is starting to warm up a little in here, though. I felt like it was freezing when I walked in, but a little warmer now.
That's the body heat over there with you two next to each other.
I think it's all the hot air that's coming out of your mouth right now.
Wow. Daniel. How are you, bud?
I'm all right, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Hey,
Looking
listen,
forward to the game.
I got a ton of heat on Twitter yesterday when I came
what?
at Kyle for having a clicky mouse. I just want to say, after the show, I went out and I bought Kyle a silent mouse to be able to use for today's podcast. Kyle, are you in the podcast studio right now? Look at it. He's got a silent mouse. He can click away to his heart's content.
Who knew a silent mouse was a thing? Like, is there silencing
Daniel
technology? Yeah, it's amazing. It must be that Secret Service stuff that Secret Squirrel's a part of. It's amazing. Thank you, Daniel. It's wireless. We are cruising. The podcast is only going to get better from this point forward.
Kyle gets a haircut and a mouse in the same day.
Advancement
we're trending
these
up.
days.
I know.
At the worldwide leader.
Daniel, do you have a present for me?
No, you're on the show today.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Jeez. Daniel coming out hot today on the Fantasy Focus.
Thanks, friend.
We are going to,
friend.
as we always do on Thursdays, preview the game between the Seahawks and the Rams tonight. It is taking place in Seattle as I adjust my microphone. We are also going to have a wide receiver cornerback section. That, of course, is Mike Clay's specialty. But we must begin on what I think might be the lengthiest injury report that we're going to have on a single show so far this year. And for that, we don't turn to Matthew. He's not here. Or even if he were here, we turn to Stephania. And Stephania, a lot of news yesterday in Carolina. So this might have slid under the radar a little bit. Panthers are going to eventually have Stephon Gilmore, but perhaps they could have Christian McCaffrey soon too. What can you tell us about his status?
Well, he was back in practice on Wednesday, and we had heard that was maybe going to be the case, and he was back doing limited work. I think it's really, we have to be cautious on all these guys we see coming off hamstring injuries who start to step back onto the practice field, because the first thing is getting through that practice, and then the next big test is how do they feel the next day. So I wouldn't get too excited just yet. I mean, we will see what happens as we get through today's practice and then into tomorrow. I suppose you could say there's a chance he's there this week. Feel really good about week 6. But the fact that he was out there, obviously a good sign.
Yeah, Matt Rule described him as basically a game-time decision yesterday.
He also said he looked real good.
Yeah.
That was his quote. So
maybe things are trending upwards for the Panthers. As Stephania noted, though, Week 6 sounds like it could very much be in the cards, which is good news because, we thought there was a chance. This could be 2, 4, 6 weeks. Who knows with hamstrings? So we'll keep you updated on Christian McCaffrey's status, have a full conversation on that tomorrow. Chase Edmonds, Stephania, for the Cardinals. I think I saw this, and I believe it was Ryan McDowell who noted he's the only running back who's been in the top 20 every week so far this season. What do you know about his status?
Really? I don't know about that, but I do know that he didn't practice on Wednesday because of a shoulder issue. So, stay tuned. This is something new that we were not aware of immediately post-game.
Okay, and we'll, of course, update what that means for James Conner if Edmonds' status is in doubt for Week 5. Conner had 2 touchdowns in Week 4. Moving along here to the Bengals, where Joe Mixon, this was because they played last Thursday, Stephania. We'd heard a lot of reporting, but no practice for 5 days. Now they practice on Wednesday. What was Joe Mixon's participation?
0. And I think this, Field, you and I talked about it the other day, that this with Zach Taylor saying he was more day-to-day than week-to-week, which has been the earlier report from Adam Schefter. And we reminded people of what the Joe Mixon updates were like last year. I joked with Ben Baby, who covers the Bengals for us, NFL Nation reporter, who really literally last year became the Joe Mixon watch person and was providing updates on the regular to be prepared that he might be doing the same thing again. So it is going to be a day. This is the problem. I would say for a team, when you say someone's going to be day to day, is you invite the questions every single day.
Yeah, and we'll see whether day to day means he is back on the practice field today or not, but we're still preparing for the possibility of Samaje Perine being the number 1 running back for Cincinnati, perhaps for just one game. Antonio Gibson missed a day of practice last week, Stephania. And how about now? What's the status for the football team as they prepare for their matchup against the Saints this week?
He didn't practice on Wednesday, but if you look at how much work he got and the fact that he had, what did he score last week? He had 75 yards in addition to the score. And that was coming off the shin injury that kept him out one day last week and then limited heading into the game. So I would look at this as more as a day of rest. Even though they don't call it that, he's not participating in practice, but I think they hold these guys out midweek. Wednesday is often the day.
It's week 5, but we are already into the load management portion of the season as it pertains to practice in the NFL. For the 49ers to find, it's been a mess still.
Yep.
However, we do have a bit of an update on Eli Mitchell, who at one point this season, it was the second half of week 1, looked like he could be the guy in their backfield.
Yeah, he did return to practice on a limited basis. The thing is, he was out there last week, but he remained in a no-contact jersey heading into the end of the week. So it really became clear that if you're avoiding contact, it's really not sounding like you're going to be playing in a football game anytime soon. This is an injury that originally Kyle Shanahan had referred to as a stinger and then later said, well, it was just a bit more than that. We haven't heard any details on what it is, but oftentimes these running backs, when they lower their shoulder, they end up with AC joint problems. And you wonder if the lack of contact suggests there's something else going on there. It really is going to be about contact, and he has to start taking it in practice in order to be able to play.
Last I checked, football is very much a contact sport. Mike, let me ask you about these backs right now, because we've seen some Trey Sermon. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell sounds like he's unlikely for this week. They've made some moves on the practice squad, cutting Chris Thompson and also Kerryon Johnson, and then signing Jock Patrick off the Bengals practice squad. Going into week 5, let's assume Elijah Mitchell's not available. How would you stack up this backfield?
Well, last week, Trey Sermon had 19 carries. No targets in the game,
right,
which concerns you for sure, but he had 19 carries. It's a big number. We saw a step up in his usage from the week before when there was a lot of Kyle Juszczyk. You were like, man, they don't trust Trey Sermon yet. They're using a lot of Kyle Juszczyk. So we saw that step forward. If Mitchell is out, I think Sermon is a guy you can consider at least a flex, maybe some RB2 upside. But one thing to keep an eye on is Trey Lance. Is he going to throw to the running backs?
If he starts.
If he starts.
Yep, we'll talk about that, I think, at some point later on the show.
Sure,
Fine, go ahead and do it right now.
Yeah, while we're here, we might as well mention that Jimmy Garoppolo was out there yesterday. This is a guy who we thought might miss a couple of weeks automatically with a calf contusion. It's sort of interesting. They called it a calf bruise, which fit with Jimmy Garoppolo saying it was stepped on, but then he described it in a way that sounded muscular, like it was a strain. There's a little confusion on the injury communication out there, but at least he has a chance as of today to play. We'll see how it goes.
Mike, continue the point, though. If Trey Lance is a starting quarterback.
Yeah, we're not sure if he's going to throw to running backs, right? It takes a little time before we see quarterbacks utilization. A lot of time running quarterbacks will run the ball instead of dumping it off to a running back. You see that quite often, low target shares for running backs on teams like that. So that's a situation to monitor. He had 0 targets last week, so that makes you worry a little bit about his floor, honestly, because if game script goes poorly, which could happen in this game, it's going to be a tough game, he could end up with 9 carries and no targets and crush you. So if Mitchell's out, I would say Sermon is on the flex radar, but not a must start. 2
thoughts there. By the way, Trey Lance, if he's going to throw the ball to his running backs, he's got to take some mustard off the throws right now. He is throwing Aroldis Chapman heat only on these throws that he is making. And second thing is, you mentioned Trey Sermon, not a target in the passing game. Maybe I'm falling into recency bias, but it feels like there are so few running backs this year that are factors in the passing game.
Well,
or the ones that are specialists, right? Whether it's a James White before he got hurt or a J.D. McKissick right now, guys who are seeing reasonable passing game volume, but not seeing that, they're seeing 3 carries a game.
Yeah, and that's important because you think about someone like Chase Edmonds, who you just talked about with his high floor. He's flirting around 10 to 12 carries and getting most of the passing down where they're splitting that backfield like 50-50 with Connor and Edmonds, and both of them are producing. So,
Sure.
Granted, it's a good offense, but that's important. That's why it's so important to focus in on passing down work, because that can give you such a high floor and a high ceiling, honestly, in fantasy.
Well, Kyle corrected me. Chase Edmonds is the only running back who's been a top 25 PPR scorer every week this season. I mean, that right there tells you just how productive he has been in the passing game for the Cardinals. All right, back to you, Stephania, and the Titans. They ran 100 offensive plays. I think it was 93 after you count for penalties last week. None of them included A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, as they were both out for the game. How's it looking for this Sunday against the Jaguars?
Yeah, both of them dealing with hamstring injuries. And A.J. Brown had originally been termed week to week, but he was back practicing yesterday on a limited basis. Julio Jones remained out of practice. It's interesting because Julio Jones seemed to be the one. It took a little longer for it to sound like he was going to miss the last week's game, whereas A.J. Brown seemed more serious out of the gate. Again, I would say first practice back, very limited. You really want to wait and see how they respond before you get too excited about anybody returning there.
All right, we'll keep an eye on whether Julio plays or debuts today in terms of practice and whether A.J. Brown is at all upgraded or remains limited. As we saw last week, if they don't play and you want to play with fire, go ahead and try to start a Titans wide receiver, but it simply was not your day last Sunday if you did. The matchup's great, though, because they play the Jaguars. That being said, we liked their matchup last week when they were playing an undefeated team and they lost in overtime. I should say winless team, not an undefeated team. Stephania, back here to the Bengals with T. Higgins, who has missed the past 2 games for them.
Yeah, he missed with a shoulder injury again. It's the Bengals, so if you want to know what kind of shoulder injury it is, good luck. They're not going to tell you much about injuries. They just list who's on the report, but he was back in practice, again, limited on a Wednesday. So first practice that we've seen him in since, when he missed week 3. I go back to that because that was really interesting because he came in for the walkthrough and he was listed as doubtful. And there were some who thought, well, if you're participating in the walkthrough, maybe they're giving him a shot to improve. And they did say he was going to be reevaluated on Saturday. And when he was, they did not upgrade him and he was out. But it made you think he was kind of close. Then week 4 comes and goes and he does not play. So whatever he's dealing with, it wasn't as close as they thought in week 3. So let's see how he does after putting him in practice on Wednesday.
At this point of the season, we think we know who the clear-cut number 1 Bengals wide receiver is. That's Jamar Chase. Beyond that, I think there's at least a debate about T. Higgins until he's back to 100% and Tyler Boyd, who was good this past week. Sterling Shepard, Stephania, one of 2 Giants wide receivers who's been banged up with a hamstring issue recently. Has he practiced this week?
He has not, and it's very recent. Remember, usually it's rare that a guy goes out with a hamstring injury and plays the next week. We rarely see that. He was not practicing. He was working on a side field, so he was spotted, but he was not practicing.
Okay, obviously he's been really good when he did play so far this year for the Giants, but Kenny Golladay stepped up and had his best game for the G-Men this past Sunday. Chase Claypool got hurt in practice last week, Stephania. He did not play. Where is he at now?
Back in practice. So, who knows if that was even precautionary because it was such a late injury happening late in the week. We know we don't like those Thursday injury additions to the injury report. And he ended up sitting out that game because of the hamstring, but back participating on a limited basis on Wednesday. So it sounds like he could be available.
And Claypool took to Twitter with the tweet that at least suggested he was going to play on Sunday. We'll keep an eye on the injury report today and Friday. Will Fuller, Stephania, I think we mentioned this. Well, we did mention it during the breaking news of the show yesterday, but just to recap, what happened with him?
Broken finger, and they placed him on injured reserve, which is interesting. I wouldn't necessarily thought he would have to miss 3 weeks, but I am finding, and I think the teams are doing this, and I don't fault them for it at all. I actually think it's really helpful, is that with this roster flexibility they have, which was put in place because of COVID-19, they are quicker to place a player on an injured reserve, and it just makes the decision-making internally much easier. You set the player aside, allow them to heal. You know they're going to be absent for three weeks, and you can plan accordingly.
The Dolphins' best wide receiver recently has been Mike Gesicki, and I know you're going to say he's a tight end, which he is in our game. I believe he's played 9 snaps so far as a tight end. They've played 4 games. Mike Gesicki is an oversized wide receiver, and I say that in like a way of admiration. He's really, really good. He's super athletic, good in the middle of the field. We'll see if he can stay hot and busy for the Dolphins as he has been over the past couple of weeks. They, of course, play the Bucks on Sunday. Let's get
Speaking
some
tight ends.
Yeah, a lot of tight ends.
You might need
here.
him as a replacement.
That's right. And Logan Thomas. He left the game early for Washington this past Sunday. Stephania, it looked bad, and now we know more.
I mean, it was right at the start of the game that he ended up out with a hamstring injury. I think I mentioned before, but he signaled like waved himself out of the game. So that just tells you that it was significant enough that he knew right away he needed to stop playing. No surprise then that he's not practicing yet.
And how about TJ Hawkinson?
Oh,
This one
and
kinda,
by the way, I should mention, not practicing yet, Logan Thomas, they moved him to injured reserve yesterday.
which means
So
at least
you're going to be
3
week
games
8
missed.
before you can see him.
At minimum, right. And how about TJ Hawkinson, Stephania?
Listed with a knee injury, which we didn't hear about this after the game. So this is something that showed up on the injury report for him. And he's been healthy, you know, despite getting beat up a lot in every single week. He came into the season coming off a shoulder injury in the preseason. So when I saw his name on the injury report, I thought, oh, he must have aggravated that. No, it turns out it's a knee issue. Nothing given by the Lions as to the seriousness of it. And so we shall stay tuned.
By the way, Daniel has offered his own knee to replace TJ's if it is not well enough to play on Sunday.
accurate.
Take mine.
No, otherwise we're basically the same person. Let's move forward, Stephania, to one more injury update. It is, of course, Gronk, who missed this past week against New England. Now, the Bucs have not or did not place him on IR, and he was guaranteed to miss 1 game. So the fact that he has been placed on IR, could that mean that he's getting closer to a return?
I mean, I would look at it as certainly a possibility because the fact that they didn't place him on IR obviously leaves the window open for him to return sooner than a 3-game absence. We talked about the stats, the data from our friends at fantasypredictors.com about rib injuries, and that if you have multiple rib injuries, in other words, more than 2, the absence tends to shoot up to 4 to 8 weeks. Whereas if you only have 1 or 2 rib fractures, it tends to be between 1 and 2 weeks. We don't know how many ribs Gronk broke, but we also know he's exceptionally tough. And clinically, they may be seeing that he's doing well enough, moving better, having less pain, that they're comfortable keeping him on the active roster and seeing how he progresses.
Like, how many ribs do you have?
1, 2, I don't know, like 50 or 60.
Wait, really?
Wow.
You have a lot of
Do they
ribs.
go from like the top to your ankles?
Got thigh ribs, got calf ribs.
How many do you have? 8? Is it 8? What's the number?
No.
10?
I mean, I'm going to give you an assignment. How many? You guys go home and you count how many ribs you have. There's.
Well, I can count right now. I don't feel any in there. There's a little layer of
I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a hint. The middle, so you have your neck, your low back, and then your mid back. And your mid back is your thoracic spine. For your thoracic spine, for every vertebrae, there's a rib that matches.
Okay.
You can figure out how many thoracic vertebrae you have. You'll know how many ribs you have.
Yeah.
6?
I think it's 12 aside.
Yes. 12.
How about that?
You got it.
Yeah, all right.
Field's the
say,
smartest
I don't know,
one in the room.
I'm sticking with 50.
50.
I feel 50.
Except if you have a cervical rib, which is an anomaly, sometimes causes thoracic outlet syndrome, and sometimes people have that surgically removed.
Okay.
Okay, that's your anatomy lesson for today. You're welcome.
Wow, we should do this every Thursday, an anatomy lesson, right?
Sounds like a little game. I love that Mike thinks he has 50 or 60 ribs. I just want to go draw a skeleton with that.
Close.
Close enough.
Listen, his numbers are limited to like projections, right? Like he's good on projections. Counting ribs, not his
And
strike.
technically, you have 20. I mean, you have ribs on each side.
I said
so
12 sides.
it's
Yeah, I said
12.
that. Yeah, that was
I
good.
know, but I don't know if everybody heard that.
Oh,
So I just
okay.
want to
Thank
be very clear.
Thank you very much for that. It's fun.
Yeah,
Field, you're
my-
so
my-
smart.
I don't know about that, but every
Teacher's
once in a
pet.
while, a blind squirrel
Teacher's
finds a
pet.
nut, right? We're going to preview Thursday Night Football in just a minute, but first, before we do that, I have a question for you, Mike.
Okay.
Do you own or rent your home?
Yes, I do.
I knew you did, and I bet it can be hard work.
Always.
Yeah, but you know what's easy?
What is?
Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
Today's episode of Fantasy Focus is also brought to you by Captain Morgan. NFL fans know as the season gets underway, you got to have the right players for all 60 minutes to bring that spark. And sometimes you got to sub someone in to switch things up. I mean, that same thing goes for the drink in your hand on game day. So if you're looking to sub in something more refreshing, do like I did and put Mike on the couch instead of Matthew. Or you can pour yourself a delicious, crisp Captain Morgan original spiced rum and ginger. Sub in the Captain. Captain Morgan, the official spiced rum of the NFL. Visit CaptainMorgan.com to find Captain near you. Drink responsibly. Captain Morgan Rum Company, New York. New York. We can do that on the show, right? We can have a little Captain in the morning, right? 11 o'clock, once 11 hits.
Yeah, I mean, I like breakfast beers. I think breakfast captain's also good too.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Daniel, wait for the slate next time, will you?
I'm so sorry about the slate, guys.
Game preview. Game
Is this
preview.
your
game preview,
first
game preview.
production?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Let's preview Thursday Night Football. The Rams travel to Seattle to play the Seahawks. The Rams are 3-1. The Seahawks are 2-2. Seattle looking to tie them record-wise after 5 weeks. They, of course, will still trail the Cardinals if that's the case, because the Cardinals are the only undefeated team in the NFL. Mike, let's get to the quarterback, and we start with Matthew Stafford, who's been quarterback 8 on the season. It's been a really solid start for Stafford. I think the optimistic view of Stafford coming into the year has been how it's played out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he has been, and you might wonder, why we have him ranked 7th, 8th, even though the Rams are playing so well, and he's been good. He's 4th in passing yards, 2nd in passing touchdowns so far this season with 11, but he has the 2 top 10s. He's also finished 15th or worse twice, right? So it's not like he's been just crushing it like a Patrick Mahomes or a Kyler Murray so far. So we have to hedge a little bit on that, but it is a good matchup. The Seahawks have allowed the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, the 4th most yards this season, especially lately, right? I mean, they've been getting crushed. 322-plus passing yards in 3 straight games. They had 3 passing touchdowns in their past 2 games. So, they're struggling on that side of the ball. Stafford's playing well. He's not going to run, but he's going to throw a ton in this offense. And they are scoring more touchdowns through the air than we've seen from Sean McVay offenses in the past. So it's full steam ahead for this Rams offense. We like the matchup. I think we're going to have a lot of points on the board. Stafford, you got him. You're starting him.
Yeah, the Seahawks, of course, so banged up. And just limited at cornerback, right? Not even banged up, just limited at cornerback. I think there were a lot of people that were in Seattle yesterday clamoring for Stephon Gilmore trade. It did not, of course, happen, but that's still a position where they are very, very vulnerable.
Yeah, they acquired, they've been playing musical chairs at corner all offseason trying to bring guys in. They actually benched Trey Flowers last week, who was benched last year for someone else. Made the change again. It was Dunbar last year. Now it's Sidney Jones, who went from the Eagles to the Jags, now to Seattle. So you're right. DJ Reed's their top corner. He was a safety with the 49ers. So they're really, still rotating, still trying to figure out that spot.
They are piecing it together in the secondary. Running back-wise, Darrell Henderson, I think he's going to be listed on the injury report for a little while still with that ribs issue, but he played last week, going to play again tonight. And, Mike, it was weird. I said this on the show a few weeks ago that, whatever your view of Darrell Henderson was, typically there were 2 views. One was if he stays healthy, he can be a top 15 running back, but you're concerned about him staying healthy, so you have to lower him accordingly. It's been 4 games. He's been really good in the 3 he's played, and then he missed one because of injury. So both sides won here, but he's healthy now, and you have to, again, love the play this week.
Listen, if he stays healthy the rest of the season and his role doesn't change, he'll be a top 5 fantasy running back. I mean, that's how, look at it. He's played 3 active games so far, right? 83% of the snaps, 14.3 carries, and 4 targets per game. He has 82-plus scrimmage yards in all of those games. He's been a top 16 fantasy running back in all 3 of those games. Has a couple touchdowns as well, 2 scores in 3 games. And, he's in this Rams offense. It's scoring points at will. I mean, if he plays 80, 90% of the snaps, he's just going to totally light it up this season. It's a volume game. It's a numbers game. And if he keeps getting the work in a good offense, he's going to deliver. So we like that going forward for him. As for this week, the Seahawks are allowing 201 scrimmage yards per game to running backs this season.
Wow.
We talked about their struggles against the pass. Even worse against the running back position. 2nd most fantasy points, most rushing yards, most receiving yards, and 4th most receptions allowed to running backs this season. So he has the role. He's going to play maybe 90% of the snaps, and he's a great matchup. Henderson, if you have him, you're obviously starting him this week.
It's amazing how Seattle, let's call it during the Russell Wilson era of 2011, 2012 on, has gone from being such a dominant defensive team to such a chemically imbalanced team now. Other than, they've got a few, Poppy Wagner's as good as it gets, but they are such an offensive team now. It's just weird how the tides have turned so dramatically there. I completely agree on everything you said with Henderson for tonight. I do think that the snaps will even off, not entirely between he and Sony Michel. I think Michel's role will grow as the season wears on, not because Henderson will have a regression in his performance, but just the idea. It's a long season. He's a smaller guy. This is protecting them for when they get closer to their goal, which is playing meaningful games in January and maybe even February. Excuse me. But for now, Henderson, he's in that category, must starts for running backs.
Yeah, I almost wondered if Michelle was limited a bit last week because he had that tough matchup against that elite
Bucks, yeah, he played
Buccaneer,
great.
and he had, 20 touches, just banging it between the tackles the whole game. I mean, that's tough. That's a grind.
And I thought he looked good, too,
He
by
did.
the way.
I agree. I agree. But right now, they trust Henderson. So for now, he's the starter. Michelle, a good bench guy. I mean, in terms of insurance options, as good as it gets.
I've been talking about this, and Daniel and I talked about this after the show yesterday. Like, at some point, I want to start just, reading during the week, here are my running backs, especially with running backs because there are so few of them. My tier of must starts, must start elite plays, right? That's like the Derrick Henrys, the Dalvin Cooks, that type of mold, right? Then there's the must starts where it's this would be an example. Darrell Henderson, if you have him, you're starting him tonight, right? Then you have the next category, which would be you're almost assuredly starting this player. You might have better options, but you're almost assuredly let's say I don't know, Miles Sanders, right? Maybe that's a bad one, but guys who are in that category.
Sure.
And this would be an example of a guy who's a must start with a good upside, maybe not elite upside yet, but Henderson has been so good so far for the Rams. Cooper Kupp, Mike, you and I have a big difference here in our rankings. As you have him as a number 1 wide receiver on the board, I have him all the way down at number 2 amongst wide receivers. So who's right and who's wrong?
Wow. I mean, if you've seen him play at all this year,
I
you
know
need to
I
update
don't
your
watch
ranks,
football.
man.
No, I've been too busy watching Squid Games to watch football this year.
I see that.
Yes.
because you haven't seen.
Might
that
be
he's-
worth it.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
Games is crazy.
the number one fantasy receiver this season. So you should be number one this week.
Wow, is that how
I
it
would
works?
say. That is how it works.
Okay.
So, look, 3 top 10s already. Kind of came back to earth a little bit last week, but look, he's been fantastic. 10+ targets in every game, a 34% target share. That's going to be near the top of the league as we go forward this season. Leads all receivers in targets and touchdowns. Top 3 in yardage, end zone targets as well, which is a big one. He's an undersized wide receiver. Those guys aren't always going to deliver in the touchdown department, but he is getting the end zone targets and the scores. That's terrific news. And again, just to put a number on the matchup here, Seahawks 194+ yards to receivers in their past 3 games, top 10 in yards and touchdowns to that position this season. So again, heavy usage, high scoring offense, great matchup. What else is there to say? Great matchup. You're starting them obviously, but even in DFS, if you're playing showdown tonight, showdown captain, obviously a great option.
There is something else to say. Because I'm sitting here looking at our monitor for those that are watching the live stream, and they may notice that it's hard to find someone not named Daniel Dopp who has both an elite beard and wonderful lettuce on his Cooper Kupp's got great hair and a great beard, Daniel, which counts for something. So if you need another reason why he is arguably the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy this week, that combo, right? That's lethal. I know the people who are listening on audio are like, what are you guys talking about? Go check his headshot. This thing is elite. That's my analysis on Cooper Kupp. Let's move forward to Robert Woods, which
Only
is
a little
lot
different than my
trickier.
analysis.
Mike,
basically the same.
Typical
but
Mike
a little
going
different.
with right down the middle, me thinking outside the box. That's how you win in life, Mike. You don't just do what everybody else tells you you're supposed to do.
So you're saying sit Cooper Kupp, got it.
No, I'm saying have him number 2 on your board, not number 1.
All right.
Robert Woods is really tricky, Mike. It is a really tricky situation.
Yeah, no, this is a tough one.
Under 65 receiving yards in all 4 games this year. He got a touchdown late. On Fantasy Football Now on Sunday, Lindsey Theory talked about how Robert Woods, at least not yet, had not been that guy who was like, hey, give me more touches. He had not yet become the squeaky wheel. After Sunday's performance, in which they lost, by the way, there have been some comments that make you feel like Robert Woods is more willing to be the squeaky wheel. Is tonight, the night that Robert Woods looks like Robert Woods?
Yeah, maybe that adds up coming off a loss, right?
Of course.
When you lose and you're not part of it, you're just
Yeah.
like, all right, we want to win. Give me the ball,
Right.
So I kind of get that. It's I mean, look, his usage isn't insanely. It's not like a Robbie Anderson situation, right? Where the usage
He's breaking
is
out, by the way, this week.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, his targets were up last week, so that's good. But Robert Woods is at 6.3 targets per game. He was at 8.1 last year, right? So it's not like they need to completely change everything. You can have 2 more targets a game, and we're back on track where we were last season. But look, this is a guy who has had such a high floor, has been so consistent the last few years, and this year he's 40th in fantasy points, 38th in targets, 44th in catches, 55th in yards. It's just a huge drop-off with what we're used to from him. But there is good news. First of all, I just talked about it's not a huge target difference. Also, second a wide receiver in end zone targets, 7th in expected touchdowns. So he's getting some work near the goal line, right? So again, we're close here. We're close here with Woods, and he does benefit from Stafford. He benefits from a high-scoring offense. So I think there is reason that Woods can get back on track here.
That is all sounding good to me. I think, though, that we've talked. So let me ask you this, Mike, because I feel like this is the conversation we've had a bunch on the show, if you have Robert Woods, is it at the point now where you're going to let him earn his way back into your lineup? Like bench him until he gives you a reason to start him?
Oh, it depends. I mean, I have to hedge.
I
mean, it depends
know,
on your like who we talking about,
I know.
But I mean, if I'm ranked 32nd, I mean,
Okay.
you could check the rankings, and there, certainly there's more guys ahead of him than there would have been at the beginning of the season. So yeah, I mean, there's other options out there that maybe you want to go that direction. But at the end of the day, I'm still ranking him as a wide receiver 3. I think there's optimism that he'll be okay.
Don't you love how Mike is just so like he's so right down the middle, like smart. He's like, yeah, well, it depends on who else you have. Yeah, I know that, Mike. I'm trying to get you to give me a spicy answer. Like, no, bench his butt until he proves he deserves to be in your lineup.
No, don't do that. You're crazy, man. What do you?
Mike being way too logical. You're not made for fantasy football, Mike. You should know that.
I know. I am.
Okay.
I am.
Okay.
You have to be optimistic and see the upside, but you have to play that Buzz Killington role as well and see the downside. You watch both sides of it, put them together. You have yourself some good fantasy success. That's
There
the
you have
trick.
it. Go check the
That's the
ranks
recipe.
if you have a dilemma at your second wide receiver spot, maybe your flex spot that you think the ranks could answer. Tyler Higbee cracks our top 9 for all of us. Higbee is not a must-start amongst tight ends, but let's be honest, if you're not Travis Kelce or Darren Waller or Mark Andrews, you might not be. He's been fine so far this season. Let's get to the Seahawks, Mike. Russell Wilson, who has 0 interceptions this year. He is the only quarterback that has started and finished every game this year that has not yet thrown a pick. He's averaging 9.6 yards per passing attempt, best in the NFL. But are you nervous at all about this matchup tonight?
Not super nervous about that. I'm more worried about the volume of the Seahawks offense.
Okay.
Right? Because that's kind of limiting Russell Wilson so far. The Seahawks offense has run 9 fewer offensive snaps than any other team in the NFL. They are 94 behind the Titans, who are number 1. That's like a game and a half worth of offensive snaps. The average is right around 64, 65 in the league. So that's really low, and that needs to change going forward. We need more plays if he's gonna produce in fantasy, because right now he's 28th in pass attempts, 16th in passing yards. He has the 9 passing touchdowns. It's kind of bailing you out so far. Because the other thing is his rushing: 15 carries, 58 yards, and 1 touchdown. He's 15th at quarterback in rushing yards. He's never finished lower than 9th, so that's dropped off a little bit as well. Now again, if they start running more plays, they get back to where they've been in the past. This is all fixable stuff, right? But this is 4 straight games now where they've run like 55 offensive snaps. So, that has kind of held him back so far. As for the Rams, they've only had 4 touchdowns through the air so far. We know that they're a terrific defense, but teams have to throw against them because they score a lot. It's much like the Buccaneers. We've talked about this. 5th most pass attempts faced, 7th most yards. So I think, again, I'm expecting a high-scoring game. I'm expecting it to be close. So Russell will have to throw the ball in this game. So if you have him, again, I don't think this is a situation where you're benching him. You still start Russell Wilson.
Okay, that's good news right there from Mike on Russell Wilson. And I think we all feel the same way, right? After yesterday's show, Daniel and I also talked about the idea that, like, what we need to start doing every week is coming up with a list of streaming quarterback options, like 2 to 3 of them, or maybe more, maybe less, depending on the week. And then also come up with a list, if there are any, of quarterbacks that you're like, normally he's an absolute must start. This week, I would consider benching him for a Daniel Jones or a Kirk Cousins or a Derek Carr. I think Russell Wilson might be close this week, only because the matchup is a little bit concerning, but not quite there yet. I've got him 8th on my quarterback board. Stephania, Chris Carson played last week, but he split snaps with Alex Collins. Could it be that there's an injury issue that might help explain that?
There is an injury issue. I don't know that anyone's really related it to what happened last week yet. When he came out of that game, clearly Alex Collins had dominated in terms of the run game, but when he didn't practice on Monday, they listed it as a rest day for veterans. So didn't really seem like there was anything going on. And then on Tuesday, he was listed as a non-participant because of his neck, again on Wednesday. And then Pete Carroll spoke to reporters about it. And I want to read you his quote. He said of Chris Carson, he's had kind of a long-term, I guess it would be kind of a condition that he's dealt with. And sometimes it flares up and sometimes it doesn't. We've tested him and MRI'd him and all that kind of stuff, and it's no different than it's been. It's just obviously inflamed right now, and so we've got to see if it quiets down. I think there's a few things that I interpret from this. Number one, this is a chronic intermittent condition, meaning there's something that's there that they can visibly see on an MRI, but at times it doesn't bother him, and at times when it's inflamed, it bothers him enough that he's unable to play. And I would say just for tonight's purposes, it doesn't look like he's going to play, and even if he did, I would be looking at Alex Collins as the one who's going to carry the bulk of the workload. Just the tone of Pete Carroll's comments when he was talking about it sounded a little bit concerned. I think Chris Carson is going to miss this game, and it just does alert us to the fact that this could be something that crops up again. On the flip side, to not be too down about it, it's obviously something that's been there, and he's been able to play and perform really effectively in spite of this chronic issue.
Okay, so there's the health update. Mike, let's go through two scenarios here. One, if Chris Carson plays, what's his value? Two, if Alex Collins has to play for Chris Carson, what's his value?
Yeah, so again, you don't like to see the snap counts going down. He's been under 50% 2 weeks in a row. This isn't just a last week thing. So that makes you a little nervous. He just have the 3 touchdowns, but he only has 6 targets this season, right? So that only 3 over his past 3 games. So that's making me a little bit nervous. We need more in work in the passing game here for Chris Carson. We don't need a ton. We don't need 6 or 7 targets, but we need a little bit more to keep him afloat as a borderline RB1. But look, if he plays in this game, I think you have to start him unless there's a report that he's going to be there for emergency purposes. But they also have a decent amount of depth there, right? With Alex Collins, Travis Homer, TJ Dallas. They have other options, guys that can play if Carson is limited or out in this game. So, but again, if he starts, he's been good enough. You could play him, especially in this matchup against the Rams. The other side of it, of course, is if he's out. Do you want me to jump right into that?
Yeah, go ahead for Alex Collins.
Yep. 10 carries, 2 targets last week, right? So we already saw some decent involvement. If you take away Carson's usage, he's going to play a big role. It just feels like they haven't really committed to DJ Dallas or Travis Homer for a big offensive role. So I think we'll see a lot of Collins with little Homer in passing situations. Maybe DJ Dallas gets a couple touches, but they really like him for special teams. In fact, I thought at one point maybe a running back needy team would be interested in him because he's been effective when he's been called on, but they love him for special teams. I don't know if he's going anywhere, and he'll probably stick with that kind of role. So Collins, flex option at worst, maybe an RB2 tonight if Carson's out.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I have both of them, and I'm starting Chris Collins.
Chris Collins, you're not starting either of them. You're starting Chris Collins.
No. Scratch that. Do-over, except we're live. I'm starting Alex Collins, and I am having Chris Carson on my bench because the nature of the injury worries me too much. It's not like a sore ankle or something. So
just to clarify, even if Chris Carson's active, you're going to play
I'm
Alex
going to start
Collins.
Alex Collins,
Okay.
yeah.
That's good context right there. All right, so the Seahawks, we'll see. And, of course, actives and inactives will be due around 6:50 Eastern time for the game that kicks around 8:15 or 8:20. 2 wide receivers here, Mike. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. You have DK Metcalf third on your board. So quickly, and we're going to talk about other wide receiver cornerback matchups of note. Do you expect a potential Jalen Ramsey shadow tonight for anybody?
Man, this is a tough one, right? I mean, Ramsey still is not shadowed this week. He did not last week. There's a few plays where he went out and covered DeAndre Hopkins, but not a full-time shadow like last season. And these teams actually played 3 times last year. They played in the playoffs, too. He shadowed him in all 3 of those games. So on one hand, you have that information. On the other hand, you have he hasn't shadowed at all this season. They seem to trust Darius Williams out there on the perimeter this week. So if I had to put money on it, I would say probably not. You'll see some snaps. Also, keep in mind, he's been playing in the slot quite a bit, right, in that star position. If he just plays that role throughout this game, about half the time he'll be on either Lockett or Metcalf because they rotate inside. So, that's maybe what they're thinking. He'll get a taste of both of those guys. So I think you should consider it, that it's a possibility. Just keep that in the back of your head. But on the other hand, it's not enough of a concern that you're even thinking about sitting DK Metcalf, right? You're not even thinking about it, so you fire him up.
Yeah, you're firing him up. I think I got a gut feeling that we see Jalen Ramsey shadowing DK Metcalf for a healthy percentage of snaps tonight.
You think so?
The line of thinking being that if you look at the teams that they have played so far this year, the Rams, you go through them, like week 1, Chicago Bears, I just don't know that you're concerned about that passing attack that much. Even if Allen Robinson is clearly their best wide receiver right now, week 2, I don't remember who they played off of hand, but week 3 we know is the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
They have so many guys that you're picking your poison.
Yeah, he was on Godwin a lot. Yeah.
Right, but it's like you could be on Godwin or Mike Evans. Antonio Brown probably not because he's playing in the slot more. I guess Ramsey has too, but still, the point is,
Played the Colts in week 2.
Week 2. All right, so who you chat with, especially with the way that
Pittman,
offense is.
it would be you're not.
Week 4, DeAndre Hopkins is an amazing receiver. What he is not, though, is a vertical threat, right? He is much of his damage takes place within 10 to 15 yards of the line of scrimmage. DK Metcalf's the first real unique vertical threat that's big body that does not have another offense that has 2 or 3 excellent pass catchers as well. Tyler Lockett's incredible, but he feels much more body type-wise like Darius Williams. So I'm taking over the Mike Clay role here for a second.
Right.
And if I'm wrong, It's your fault.
I'm definitely curious. I'll take a look. That's fine with me. That's fine with me. Well, again, you're Mr. Bold Call today. I'm just playing reasonable analyst here, right? But at the end of the day, I think we both agree you're starting DK Metcalf. I don't know. You're crazy on Cooper
I've got him
Kupp
at
here. Are you
4,
good on
so,
Metcalf?
I'm still good.
Okay,
I'm still
we're
good. And
starting.
I've also got Tyler Lockett inside my top 15, as do you. We understand there have been 2 bad back-to-back games. Guys,
Again, just like
this is
last
Tyler
year.
Lockett. This is the Tyler Lockett experience.
Yeah,
This is what you signed up
unbelievable.
for when you
We told you
drafted
before
Tyler
the season
Lockett.
started.
This has been, 3 straight years of it, right?
Yeah, this is unbelievable. Just like last year, we saw the same thing. And boom, he scored most of his points in like 4 games last year. We're seeing it again. The first 2 games, great. Now 2 duds. He's had 5 or fewer targets in 3 of the 4 games. But again, part of that is there's just like unbelievable low volume for the Seahawks offense, which again, at some point, you would expect to change.
Stephania, one last note on this game before we pick it is Gerald Everett for the Seahawks missed last week's game after landing on the COVID list. Is he still on it?
It's unclear. I mean, he's not been activated yet, but he has a chance to be activated for tonight's game. He needs one more negative COVID test result.
Okay.
And it sounds like it is a possibility that he will be available.
All right. And he's been a tight end for the Seahawks, right? They have not gotten much out of the tight end spot so far this year, in part because they got 2 great wide receivers. Let's pick this game. Seahawks playing host to the Rams. Give me the Rams 24, Seahawks 23, Mike.
Wow. I have more points.
No.
Rams 29-27.
Okay,
More
Stephania.
points.
I'm going to take the Seahawks, mostly because I just want to cause some more chaos in the NFC West. I mean, I hate that the Cardinals are undefeated, but at least the Rams need another loss. Seahawks playing at home, that 12th man is always really, really tough. And, Matthew Stafford has – how many games has he played in Seattle?
I don't know, but did you know that he went to high school
Only
with Clayton Kershaw?
Yeah,
Heard that.
stop it. But my point being, that's a tough experience when you're not used to it, you know?
Yeah.
Daniel?
I think Seattle.
I'm going to take the Rams. I believe in Matthew Stafford.
are
I want to take
wrong.
Seattle because
You're
I
all
love
wrong.
I got so many Seattle people, but I think I got to go with the Rams.
I feel like you have to adopt a team now. Like, Lions are always your squad. but,
Yeah.
like for your January team.
Yes.
Maybe it's Matthew Stafford and the Rams.
It's either Matthew Stafford and the Rams or it's the Baltimore Ravens because when I lived in Baltimore, I just freaking loved that city.
Yeah, it's a
I
great
loved
spot.
being able to be there, and it's a great fan base. I really enjoyed being able to be there.
We can't really be friends if you take the Rams, so I vote for Baltimore.
For Baltimore? All right. That's an AFC team, so an AFC team and an NFC team, I'm fine with that.
Hey, we had a great live show there, too.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did.
Yeah, we did.
We're going to come.
I grew up at the Inner Harbor, man. I was there all the time at Orioles games. and
Baltimore?
Ravens games.
Yep.
Yeah.
I lived in
from Philly.
I was, but I went to games all the time.
It's
Every
not
weekend
far.
I was
Philly
somewhere.
is not far
No,
from Baltimore.
we used to go to the Inner Harbor all the time. There's an ESPN zone there when
Really?
that was
Yep.
kind of a new thing. It was jam packed all the time. We
Did
loved
you have
it.
ESPN the phone?
ESPN.
You remember that?
No, I did not have ESPN.
They came out with an ESPN phone back in the day.
Yes,
forgot
I
about that.
remember that. That
Okay,
was a
cool.
short-lived
Missed those.
experience. But
I missed those.
Yep.
Who needs an iPhone when you can have an ESPN phone? We're going to come back and talk about wide receiver cornerback matchups, specifically upgrades and downgrades in just a second. But first, forge your NFL dynasty in Madden NFL 22 with new franchise features that deliver even more control. Manage your coaching staff and upgrade them with new talent. Devise a new game plan for every opponent with in-depth weekly strategy. Experience the ups and downs of a real NFL season with the enhanced season engine. Madden NFL 22. Game day happens here. It's available now.
This episode of Fantasy Focus, This episode of Fantasy Focus is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'd like to remind you, is the only place that you drive through just for the fries. I mean, think about this. This is a true story. It happened to me. You're sitting in your car with a hot bag of McDonald's fries. The smell filling your tan 2004 Honda Civic, which isn't the point of the story, but it's paid off, and that's what's important to you in life. You reach into that bag and you feel a hot and slightly salty fry touch your fingertips. Your mouth starts to water. Oh my gosh, let's stop talking about fries and start eating them for free on Fridays with free Fry Fridays in the McDonald's app. Get this, all you have to do to get yourself a free medium McDonald's fry is spend $1 on anything in the McDonald's app. It's literally that easy. Free medium fries when you order on the app with the purchase of $1 or more. Offer valid through 12/31/21 at participating U.S. McDonald's. Valid one time a day. Excludes tax. McDonald's app download and registration required. Find yourself the McDonald's app and get yourself some free fries tomorrow.
Good job, Daniel.
Thanks, buddy. I waited for the
First
slate.
of all,
That was what
I'm
I used to
totally
do.
hungry and I want fries.
Me too.
Second of all, Thirsty Kyle gave me a little Matthew Stafford stat
Okay.
at Seattle that I want to share with you. He's had 2 career games at Seattle, one in 2009, one in 2015. 406 total passing yards in those games with 2 touchdowns and 5 interceptions.
Yeah, of course. He played for the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, but still, I think I'm going to win. I'm going to be the only one who wins the pick tonight. I'm just telling you right now.
We'll find out. By the way, that 2009, that was his rookie year. Like, rookies on the road, tough place to play.
You guys make an excuse. So what happened in 2015?
Again, he played for the Lions, Stephania. I don't know how many more much analysis you want.
Yeah, in 2015, like, knowing he was like, probably what happens to Stephania is he probably had like 405 passing yards in that game, but 308 of them were called back on phantom pass interference calls. And then he had like a throw that landed at the 1-inch line, and the Lions attempted 4 straight runs from the 1-inch line and somehow ended up at 4th and goal from the 29. That's probably what happened. Dan, you know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about. We were 7-9 in that
Sounds
season
like
under Jim Caldwell.
Standard game script for the Lions.
All right, let's get to the wide
I
receiver.
get it.
Dare you.
Friday. Friday.
Oh my God.
Free fries.
Oh my God.
Right? That's why it's the free fries.
I love you.
Well,
Well,
welcome to the actual
I was
analytical
just thinking about my
portion of the
lunch
show.
plans for tomorrow. I mean,
hey,
The delay.
that was so good.
want some fries. I was
my
thinking about
gosh.
the fries. That's all.
Oh, man. I love
no
Mike.
comment.
All right, let's get to the wide receiver quarterback matchups, upgrades first. And hold on, we're sitting here thinking to ourselves, the Steelers play the Broncos on Sunday. The Broncos wide receivers probably get downgraded against that good Steelers defense, right, Mike?
Yeah, you'd think that, right? Even a couple of years ago, maybe last year,
Yeah.
we'd be talking about that. But again, I mean, I feel like in the offseason, there was like, okay, we'll pick on the Steelers a little for their offensive line, right? They lost a lot of players. It's a shaky situation. But the defensive losses were kind of ignored, right? Bud Dupree on the edge, and certainly in the secondary. 2 of their top 3 corners, Steven Nelson and Mike Hillen, departed as well, and it's been a problem so far. You have Joe Hayden still playing good football on the perimeter on one side. James Pierre's on the other. Cameron Sutton is in the slot right now. They've led the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers, the 6th most over expected, the 6th most to the perimeter, the 2nd most to the slot. Just across the board, it has been a struggle so far this season. Top 8 in pretty much every category against opposing receivers. So Courtland Sutton, mostly on the perimeter, 84% of the time this year. Tim Patrick, same thing, 76% of the time. They don't really have a great slot option right now. It's Kendall Hinton. Remember him from last year? He had, he's a quarterback for 1 week in an emergency situation. He's the guy that's manning the slot right now with Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler out. So should be a lot of targets to these guys on the outside. Good matchup this week against a struggling pass defense.
All right, I would have totally guessed that you play against the Steelers and all of a sudden you go matchup downgrade. That is not the case.
Yeah, not this year, not so
All right,
far.
Let's move forward then to the Titans and the Jaguars, Mike. And the Titans defense, I don't know, they've been a little bit better than last year, but still not one that I totally trust. Could this be a good week for Trevor Lawrence and his pass catchers?
I think so. I mean, the Titans' pass defense is not better. I mean, they're just still getting lit up in that department. They were really poor in the second half last season. We're seeing it again. 2nd most fantasy points allowed to receivers, 5th most over expected, 9th most to the perimeter, 3rd most to the slot. It sounds kind of like I just said with the Steelers, just across the board struggles for this secondary. They've allowed the most receiving yards, 944 to receivers so far, and 8 touchdowns to that position. It's volume against them. It's efficiency. Again, it's just not working so far. Now, a little bit more specifically here, they've been really poor on Christian Fulton's side of the field. They've allowed the most fantasy points to that side. They've actually been above average, 9th best against right perimeter receivers. That's Shanoris Jenkins' side. No surprise, right?
Yep.
That totally adds up. Marvin Jones lines up on Jenkins' side 44% of the time. So about half the time, he doesn't really get a matchup boost. Now, he'll see some of these other guys, Chris Jackson in the slot and Fulton. So he's okay, right? We feel a little bit better than usual about him. But Laviska Shenault's really interesting. Right now, he's been in the slot 82% of the time. He's going to see a lot of Chris Jackson in this game. And we just saw one of the best games of his career last week. With DJ Chark out, suddenly you're like, whoa, they're throwing vertical balls to Laviska Shenault. And no surprise, if you know his athletic profile or saw him play last year, he delivered, right?
Yeah.
He was really good. So feeling better about him. He should see more volume and more downfield work. So we're upgrading him in the matchup, and we like his usage last week.
Can I ask a quick question about this? So I have this decision in a number of leagues that I have because I've got Allen Robinson in a lot of spots, and right now I've got both Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault on a number of my teams in a great matchup here. Are you playing either one of these guys, although they're not as good of a wide receiver as Allen Robinson, over A-Rob? given the matchup that they have.
I'm pretty sure I have Jones ahead of him. I have Jones,
Jones ahead of Allen Robinson as well.
Yeah.
Mike,
And not Laviska Shenault. Laviska Shenault's still a little too risky for you.
Yeah, I would
you-
say so.
Yeah, I
It's
want to
close,
see
though.
it. I think Mike's point so astute. Like that Thursday night game, we did see some vertical action for Laviska Shenault.
Let's see it again.
I want to see it happen again. I'm hoping that the Jaguars coaching staff is like learning on the fly here, right? James Robinson. You know what happens when you give him opportunities, Mike? He goes crazy and plays awesome. And I understand that Carlos Hyde was inactive. That's the reason why it happened. But hopefully that encourages them to remain very busy or keep James Robinson very, very busy.
By the way, I think you said Robinson was going to score twice last week, didn't you? And he did. I feel like on the show you
was that my point was if I said that.
good call.
Yeah,
anyway,
let me get the
I'm just saying
receipt.
good call. It was a good
However,
call.
what I was saying was that, like, you know what's going to happen tonight is we're all going to sit there. I had no idea that Carlos Hyde wasn't going to play, but I was like, we're going to be on Thursday Night Football, sitting there saying, "Wow, James Robinson's really freaking good."
Yeah.
Carlos
And we did. You
Hyde is
nailed it.
really average. Now, I didn't know that Carlos Hyde wasn't going to play, but still, it was like we're going to have a case to tell the Jaguars play him more.
Yeah, I
Now we
think
have a
got
case
it,
to
yeah.
play him more. So my Robbie Anderson call, that's my big one for this week. We'll talk about that
right,
at some
all
point. I can't wait to see him score a touchdown on Sunday. From the plus matchups to the negative matchups, Mike, the big NFC East matchup between the Giants and the Cowboys. Who stands to, well, not benefit in this case?
Yeah, this is a tough one. Amari Cooper likely to draw the James Bradbury shadow again, one of the premier shadow corners in the league since he's entered the league with Carolina about 6 years ago. Look, last year these two teams played twice. Bradbury shadowed him in Week 5. He did not in Week 17, but he was on him a lot throughout that game. Cooper's stats total in those two games, 13 targets, 8 catches, 64 yards, no touchdowns.
Wow.
And I believe the first game is actually the one Cooper got hurt. Week 5, yeah, it was. It was the game Cooper got hurt. Dak got hurt.
Right.
He played most of that game, then left injured. Obviously wasn't there for Week 17. But nonetheless, he did a really nice job against Cooper in that game. Bradbury's already shadowed Terry McLaurin, Calvin Ridley, Marquez Callaway this season. It's a tough matchup for Amari Cooper. He's been slumping a little bit. He caught the touchdown last week, but hasn't had a really good fantasy week since that top scoring week in Week 1. And then CeeDee Lamb on the other side, he's going to draw Dory Jackson, who, again, really good. The Giants have a really good 1-2 punch at corner on the perimeter. So tougher matchup again. Maybe this is good news for Dalton Schultz. Maybe he does it again.
How about that? And Stephania, by the way, do you have any update with Amari Cooper, that hamstring issue that I think occurred last week during the game?
Yeah, I haven't seen. Let me check.
No
and
practice
see.
Wednesday for him. I
Yeah.
just didn't know if you'd heard anything quotes-wise or anything.
I hadn't
about,
heard anything that had me concerned. Let's put it that
Okay.
way. Like the other thing is, Amari Cooper's been playing through a couple of injuries, and he did not practice. He's been doing some workouts on the side, but he hasn't really missed any time. And even when he's been playing through injuries, he's still been on the field.
Okay. Before the season, we used to have this trivia that we would ask people. Who are the Jets' cornerbacks? And if you could name more than one or two, you were a genius. So the Jets obviously hosting the Falcons, or the Falcons host the Jets in London. I don't know who. I think the Falcons actually have a home game on Sunday. So the Jets traveling to play the Falcons in London. I mean, they've got to be a matchup upgrade for Calvin Ridley, right, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, this is either the Jets just hit home runs like Joe Douglas in the draft. It was just day 3 picks, right? They spent on corners, undrafted guys. So either he's a cornerback genius and they just nailed the personnel, or Robert Saleh is just coaching him up, because so far the Jets' pass defense has been way above expectation, right?
Sure.
We thought we were going to be picking them on them all year, and maybe we will be, right? Because the schedule hasn't been tough. Keep
that's
this in
the
mind.
thing, yes.
Carolina, New England, Denver, and the Titans missing Brown and Julio last week. So that's important to note, right? We don't know for sure, but at the same time, they've gotten the job done. 4th fewest fantasy points to receivers, 4th best versus expected as well, fewest to perimeter receivers. So guys on the outside are doing nothing against them. 10th or better in receiving yards, touchdowns, and yards per target to that position. So that's the information we have through 4 weeks. So far, really good production out of this group. Saleh was talking about them yesterday, talking about how Javelin Guidry is a guy that I think he called him a stud or something, said he was outstanding. And he's coming off the bench, right? He might have to fill in for Brandon Echols this week, who's been the starter. Guidry's coming off the bench. So they've been good so far. You're going to see Calvin Ridley 80% of the time on the perimeter, again, where they have allowed the fewest fantasy points so far. He's going to see Bryce Hall out there and Echols or Guidry if he has to fill in for him. So for now, we have to at least have some pause and just not assume this is a great matchup because, again, the Jets have gotten the job done so far. I'm really intrigued to see this matchup, but at the same time, you're still starting, of course, Calvin Ridley.
Good for the Jets, man. Good for the
Yeah,
Jets.
absolutely,
I'm
yeah.
sad for Calvin Ridley right now, though, because the touchdown equity is way down because that offense stinks. It's so tough to watch right now.
Kyle Pitts, too, one of the biggest underachievers in the touchdown department in the league. His expected total is 1.9. He has 0 touchdowns. So, he should have probably a couple touchdowns. I think his day will come, though.
Let's recap the wide receiver upgrades and downgrades here on the touchscreen. Cortland Sutton and the Broncos face off against the Steelers. An up or downgrade, Mike?
We're going upgrade on those
Upgrade
guys.
for Cortland Sutton, who had one huge game this season. Hopefully we can get him back on track for another one. If I can get my touchscreen to start working, I'll see if I can make it work here in a second. There we go. Tim Patrick, who has not had a drop in 23 games. Mike,
Wow.
Upgrade or downgrade for Tim
We're going
Patrick?
upgrade as well.
All righty.
Against
Amari
Pittsburgh.
Cooper and the Cowboys play the Giants on Sunday. What do you got?
James Bradbury matchup, he's going down.
Okay. And Marvin Jones against the Titans on Sunday.
Upgrade.
Upgrade for he and also Laviska Shenault. Let's get some vertical
sir.
action for Laviska. And then finally, Calvin Ridley, we just discussed him, Mike. He goes into the downgrade category against the
sir.
New York Jets. A very surprising downgrade, but still a downgrade as per Mike Clay's research. That piece is available on ESPN Plus. It's up every Thursday. And if you don't read it, well, you're pretty much ignoring useful advice.
Wow. Not just that, but no, I mean, it's true. Mike also, his playbook that he does at the end of I used that last week. I won a ton of my games last week, in part because the playbook is so much incredible information. You have to check it out if you have ESPN Plus.
I appreciate that. And the goal there, we give you the rankings, the projections, the matchups. I have a proprietary metric to kind of look at how good teams are at stopping certain positions. That's all in there. And then just a quick write-up, right? Just like you were
on
talking
like
before.
almost every player in the that you would play in fantasy.
Everybody relevant, yeah. And it's sometimes just quick, right? Like you were saying, who are the must-start guys? I say that like this, you're never benching this guy. End of analysis, right? Sometimes that's all you need. And then the guys that require some context. This is how many snaps Chuba Hubbard played, but Rodney Smith was heavily involved in passing situations, just stuff like that for every game. Quick, bite-sized nuggets. So I hope people are enjoying it. That was the whole idea around it. Makes it, quick nuggets on every player.
Genius.
I want a real quick question here, and I realize I do this often, but I just saw on Twitter that Lions offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn says that they are likely to go without Penei Sewell at left tackle on Sunday against the Vikings. Now without Taylor Decker, Penei Sewell, and Frank Ragnow.
Wow.
Yikes.
Does that do anything for Lions pass catchers or wide receivers for you guys? Because it was already, it's a tough roster.
Well, no pass catchers, obviously. Hawkinson, you have to start.
You gotta play him.
because tight ends. Those two running backs, I still think you have to feel like Swift is pretty much a must start.
Yeah.
Williams is a potential strong flex play. That's a problem. But
I'm not starting Williams, but Swift, yes. I mean, he's playing too well. He's too good. He's young. He's getting enough volume. Got to start Swift and Hawkinson. I agree. Otherwise, no.
it's one of two offensive line situations to follow this week. Is the Patriots are on track to have 4 starters out on Sunday.
Sounds like the Eagles every year.
Yeah, no, really, right? I mean, but I know they play the Texans, so it's like they still have they still could take care of business. But if the Patriots had to get the ball out quick last Sunday against the Buccaneers, they might have to get it out at a lightning pace this Sunday against the Houston Texans. Do you want to do a quick 2 players that we disagree on slightly?
Let's do it. Let's talk about them.
Mike, I said this on Tuesday that I no longer care about the matchup for Justin Herbert. I'm going to find myself just saying he's in my top 10 no matter what. You have him outside your top 10 this week. Is the reason because of the matchup? Is it because he's just been ultra efficient? What's going on here?
Yeah, so, I mean, he only has 1 top 10 this year. 4 games, 1 top 10. So he hasn't really been that top 10 guy so far. Only 31 rushing yards. That actually ranks 25th. He's 25th at quarterback.
Yeah,
in
we
rushing
talked
yards.
about that a couple days ago.
Right,
It's crazy.
That needs to go up. I don't know if it's going to, but so far it's not there. And also, yes, the Browns, we saw them get crushed in week 1 by the Chiefs, right? It looks like, oh man, maybe we're wrong about this defense, much like the Vikings, but they've come around, right? They've been pretty good. The matchups haven't been quite as tough, although they did a great job against the Vikings who score at will the last couple of years. But 12th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks for the Browns, 2nd fewest to running backs, 3rd fewest to receivers, 10th fewest to tight ends. I mean, across the board, they've been doing a good job, and it is a loaded defense in terms of personnel. So, yeah, I think he deserves a slight downgrade. Ideally, he's probably still your best starting quarterback option, but I have him 13, so you might be able to stream over him.
Okay, there you have it. And how about I'm just more optimistic, right? He just Like Monday was a
yeah.
confidence-building game for Justin Herbert. I love the attitude, love the selflessness. I love the player. He's inside my top 10.
Love
One
watching
more.
him, man. He passes the eye test.
Quickly here, you're confident in Josh Jacobs. I'm not. The inefficiency as a runner is concerning to me. The offensive line is concerning to me. He's too touchdown dependent for my liking to be inside my top 20 this week.
Yeah, in terms of his usage, his percentage of carries and targets, he's pretty much right on track last year. But he did, with last year, 5 targets last week, too. Like to see that as well. So that's a good sign. I feel okay about him.
Okay, there you have it. Mike Clay and I see it differently. As usual, I am right. We'll be back on Friday with everything you need to know. Stephania will have the best injury recap that you can find anywhere. Daniel will be here. I think Matthew will be back. If not, Mike will be here. And we'll have all the bold predictions and calls and recaps and injury updates and Thursday night football stuff that you need to know. Until then, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Say it, Mike. Come on, say it.
French fries.
Peace out.
Peace out.